Hi friends, this is Heather Garten here. Wanted to give you an opportunity to go through our child protection policy and using this as an opportunity for you to meet a requirement for reading through our policy every year and agreeing to that. So you're receiving this link because it's time to do that renewal process. Today was not a planned thing, so no makeup, messy hair, lots of sounds in the video, but just wanted to take an opportunity to give you this information, a reminder to you of all that we need to know when it comes to keeping kids safe here at First Baptist Church in Camdenton. So our child protection policy, I'm going to be reading it to you since we have the common understanding of these things. We've already covered this with most of you. This is just a refresher course. So I'm going to read through just the highlights, knowing that they're in the main document. There is opportunities to see the supporting verses for these things. So we know that God is a God of light, and we're called to walk in his ways as children of the light. And I don't think we need to say any more about that. Darkness, of course, anyone who is not protecting children definitely would struggle to say that they're walking in the light of the Lord. Children are special in God's sight. They are a precious gift made in God's image. Jesus rebuked his disciples in righteous anger when they tried to prevent children from coming to him. Jesus welcomes children and he gives them a central place in his kingdom. God hears the prayers of the abused. Some of Jesus' harshest words are reserved for those who cause a child to stumble. I wanted to read to you the verses in Matthew 18, 5-6. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones to stumble, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. I think that's pretty clear how important God takes this. Children are valued by God, but they're also vulnerable spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, and morally. God hates the oppression of the vulnerable. God recognizes the temptation for the powerful to use their power to exploit the weak and condemns anyone who would abuse their power. So it definitely is very clear there we need to be protecting children. His redeemed image bearers, children of the light, God calls us to speak up and to use our power to protect the vulnerable. When we intervene on behalf of the vulnerable, we are reflecting the moral beauty of our God. When we remain silent or when we abuse power by harming the vulnerable, we are denying the glorious moral purity of God. This is why the abuse of power is so personal to God. So let's go through our core beliefs. We believe in promoting healthy relationships between children and adults. We believe that protecting children is an adult's responsibility. We believe that preventing and responding to abuse requires training and accountability. So let's go to our guiding principles. Our guiding principles are that an intergenerational church is God's plan. So we value the role of loving, godly adults in discipling and nurturing children. We acknowledge that children bless us in our church, and so we want to bless them in turn. Protecting children honors Christ. Jesus holds us accountable for protecting our children, and he calls us to follow his leading in loving children. Good policies, procedures, systems, and structures that facilitate mutual accountability are as we submit to Christ. We must proactively work to protect children. Preventing, responding to child abuse takes a heavy investment of time, money, and resources. But we do believe that the spiritual, emotional, physical, and financial toll of child abuse is much greater if we aren't protecting kids. We want to be up to date in all of our training and all of our protection policies. So we're going to continue to evaluate our policies as we go along. Child protection is going to require humility. We need to continually be coming before the Lord in brokenness and to confess our sin so that we can continue to minister in these ways. Those who are not those who have committed child abuse and other crimes are not allowed to work with children in our church. We believe that the church is a place for sinners. We want to be a safe place for hurting and broken people to find grace, hope, and healing. But we are at the same time going to be prioritizing the safety of the children in our care. We want to create an environment of humility and accountability where that healing can take place, separate from the children of our church. First-rate protection. We are going to do our best to continually update our policies and procedures, the way we do things, so that we can have the safest place for our children. And we also are going to value protecting everyone, not only the children, but the volunteers in our care, or volunteers that are working with us, and any child under the age of 18 in any FBC ministry. So here are some of our key commitments. We have a zero tolerance policy for child abuse. We're going to report to the civil authorities any suspicions or concerns that we have. All employees and volunteers will be screened according to our child protection policies. We will not employ anyone who's been convicted to or has confessed to abusing a child. We do not allow anyone to volunteer who's been convicted to or confessed to abusing the child. Any employee or volunteer accused will be immediately suspended from serving with children. We'll do our best to ensure that they have no access to children in the church or the community until we have clarity on the situation. Any employee or volunteer who does not abide by or help guard the child protection policies are not allowed to work with children. So, guys, it's important to know what we're asking from you so that we can make sure that we are all working together. So let's go on to the procedure. We are going to look through some of the definitions now of how we consider different things in our policy. So a child, we're going to say a child is anyone under the age of 18 years old or any person whose mental capacity is that of a minor. So we're going to protect those that are vulnerable in our church, but may not be minors as well. An adult is anyone who is 18 years of age or older. So in order to work with anyone under the age of 18, from the age of 18 up, we're going to require them to do a background check and to go through our policy, or go through our, child safety issues. Employee is anyone who's paid for their work at FBC. A volunteer is anyone who helps in these ministries. So let's get down to the ones that are a little more specific. Child abuse, any willful act, omission, or threatened act that results in physical, mental, or sexual injury or harm. So that's what we call child abuse. We call child sexual abuse any sexual act between an adult and a child or between two children when one exerts power over the other, forcing, coercing, persuading persuading a child to engage in any type of sexual act. It also includes non-contact acts such as exhibitionism, exposure to pornography, voyeurism, communicating in a sexual manner by phone or internet. Emotional abuse, when a child is not nurtured with love and security, but instead endures an environment of constant criticism, belittling, persistent threatening, or bullying. So who is a mandated reporter? It's any persons required by law to report when they have a reason to believe that a child abuse has occurred. In our state, anyone caring for children are mandatory reporters. Let me fix my papers over here. So what does that look like when it comes to screening and eligibility for service? So any adult who's been convicted of child abuse or another violent crime will not be eligible for employment at FBC or to serve within our ministries at First Baptist Church in Camdenton. All student and volunteer and adult volunteers who work with children need to be regular attenders of First Baptist Church Camdenton for 3 months prior to service. Now we do have some exceptions to that. One is for paid staff who are just starting their ministry with us. Of course, we're not going to make them wait 3 months to be with us before they can actually do their job. And also there are some of our children's ministries, such as Awana, Vacation Bible School, where area believers help contribute to our program where their church is not able to do that sort of program. So what we are asking of those folks is that they are regularly attending a like-minded church. And so all adults working with children, that will be completing the volunteer application pack. In that packet is a welcome. It is the Baptist Faith and Message. It's a copy of our volunteer policy. It is our child protection policy. It is also an application getting information about phone numbers, emails, contact, brief testimony, experience, different things like that. The background checks are in order for us to be able to just double check through that. All adults and student volunteers who work with children will give 2 personal references who can answer questions about how these volunteers work with children. And there is a designated person who will be checking the references. That has been the Children's Ministry Director, and so we'll go ahead and keep going forward with that, with whatever role comes up. All adult volunteers who work with children understand they are to be an example of the believer in their behavior and lifestyles. Volunteers agree to step down from a ministry if their behavior or their lifestyle are no longer in line with God's Word. Now, this is something that I am counting on you as volunteers to come to me. If something has happened in your family life, in your personal life, that you would say, I am no longer living as a believer, please, we want you as part of our church. We want you to come back to the Lord. We want you to be involved in the life of our church. But perhaps this is not the time for you to volunteer in our children's ministry, because we want you to be walking with the Lord. We want you to be growing in your own faith. And we know that if your lifestyle or behavior is not in line with God's Word, we can't expect you to teach it to someone else. So we're asking that you come to us. We want to help you. We want to come alongside of you to help you to grow in this area, but we are asking volunteers to remove themselves from ministry if they are personally not walking with the Lord. So we're going to refresh our background checks. It has been written in the 2015 policy as every 3 years we will refresh. Currently, we've changed that, and I am not sure why the copy I'm reading has 3 years instead of 5, but 5 years is our new policy. And we're currently this summer, 2021, are working on refreshing all of the up-to-date background checks. I know mine personally is over 11 years old, so it was time to get that refreshed because that is what we have put in our policy. Children, the staff, and the ministry leadership reserve the right to ask any volunteer to withdraw from service in children's ministry if the volunteer's character, dependability, or actions are adversely affecting the ministry. For example, if you have signed up to volunteer, but we cannot depend on you because there has been no follow through with that sign up, then we're going to take that opportunity to work alongside of you to see how we can improve that, but we may not be able to use you if we don't feel like your character, your dependability, or your actions are going to impact that ministry in a negative form. Children's ministry volunteers, both student or adults, are expected to comply with the expectations listed in the policy. So let's look at training. We're going to try our best, and this has not been an area where we've been able to do this much, to make training opportunities a yearly event. Now, this video serves as, instead of reading the policy, I'm just giving you the information. And this could be counted as volunteer training. Student volunteers are also encouraged to attend as many trainings as possible. So let's talk about reporting, because this is one area that gets very complicated, but it is very simple. We feel like God has ordained civil authorities to be his servants, and civil authorities have the power of the sword to punish those who do evil. So we can't send people to jail, but the law can. And so we want to submit to these authorities as they carry out their God-given role to punish evil. A key aspect of our submission to the God-ordained authority is to report child abuse. It is not only a sin, but it is also a felony in our country. State mandated reporting laws make it a crime to know about an abuse and to refuse to report. All adults in our state are mandatory reporters and legally responsible to report child abuse. All adults at FBC are required by law to encouraged by our leadership to report child abuse in the following circumstances. Witness. You discover or witness an act of abuse. In this situation, you must demonstrate courage. You must intervene, remove the child to a safe place, and call the authorities immediately. We're asking then that you contact the senior pastor after you've contacted the authority and complete our knowledge of suspected abuse form. The pastor can then ensure that the perpetrator has no further access to children in our church. We need our pastoral staff, our children's ministry director, our pastor, to be aware that a report has been given so that we can begin the process of making sure that from there forward, the children continue to remain safe. Disclosure. If a child tells you of an abuse they've experienced, in this instance, remain calm, keep the child talking with open-ended questions rather than leading questions. For example, what happened next? Or can you tell me more? As long as the child feels comfortable. When the child has finished the disclosure, tell the child that you believe them. That is very important. We need to not create shame or create any kind of opportunity for a child to feel like they are not able to be heard. Remind them that it is not their fault and that you are going to help them. After this initial disclosure, do not try to conduct a lengthy interview, but as soon as practical, while being sensitive to the child, call the authorities. Then we ask that you contact the senior pastor and the children's ministry director to complete that knowledge of suspected child abuse. When there is a disclosure about abuse, no one, not even the parents or the pastor, should conduct an interview of the child or conduct an internal investigation. The authorities or the Child Advocacy Center have someone who is trained to conduct these forensic interviews. The more interviews the child has, the harder it is on the child and those tasked with it investigating and potentially prosecuting the crime. So what we're saying to you is please do not interview the child. If they have disclosed information, you have the right and the ability to continue to ask them to, can you tell me more? For example, my mommy hit me. Okay, tell me a little more about that. You may find out that the child was being physically disciplined, which may or may not be child abuse. And again, this is a disclosure. Reasonable cause. This is the third option. So we have had witness, we've had disclosure, now we have a reasonable cause. If you have reasonable cause that child abuse has occurred, you do not have to have absolute proof. Instead, you have seen one or more signs that make you believe that child abuse or neglect is being present in this child's life. After reporting reasonable cause, again, fill out the form for us so that we can make sure. But some of those reasonable cause signs are bleeding, bruising, pain, or other signs of trauma. Often this is most evident in a very extremely young child who you're changing a diaper with. I would not expect an older child for you to have any need to know that kind of stuff. This is going to be different from something like a diaper rash, which may or may not be just a normal part of having a diaper on. So if you see signs of a sexually transmitted disease in a child, if the child is acting in inappropriate ways, using sexual language or behavior that's not age appropriate, including promiscuous behavior, that is a warning sign. Repeated boundary violations by an adult or a student volunteer. For example, you find an adult or student volunteer that is isolating with a child or pushing the limits of inappropriate touch after being warned not to do so. Emotional or behavioral signs such as withdrawal, fear, depression, anger, swings in mood or behavior, difficulty sitting or walking without pain. So again, this reasonable cause is one or more of these symptoms or these things. May or may not be anything that will be acted upon by the civil authorities, but these are ones where we're asking you to as leaders to keep an eye out for. So when an incident report is made, they should document in that knowledge of suspected child abuse form, turn it into the office in a sealed envelope addressed to the senior pastor. This form will be kept on file with the church office and will serve as our internal record documenting thing of when the authorities were contacted. Any adults who report suspected abuse to the authorities should contact the senior pastor. We want to make sure that we're taking every information so it's not a surprise to those that are once there has been a disclosure or a report made, we are encouraging everyone involved in the incident to use biblical wisdom when speaking about it. Only speak of the incident and times and places that will help protect children, aid investigators, or bring healing to the parties involved. So we are not called to be counselors. We are not called to be investigators. We are not called to be anyone who is going to do anything further. But we do need to remember that people's stories are private, and we want to keep them private, only those that are necessary. So I want to make sure we're not telling other people of this incident. So when suspected abuse is reported to the civil authorities and suspected abuse occurs on the property or ministry event, the leadership will do some internal investigation of the incident, not of the problem or the thing, but some of the questions that we're going to be asking are, did the adults and the volunteers follow our policies? If not, what was the failure in our policies? Is there an area that needs to be altered so we can not have that as a problem in the future? If a report has been made and the civil authorities do not file charges, FBC will conduct its own investigation to determine if the persons involved should be working with children. Because the civil authorities don't have enough evidence to take any further action, does not mean that that person is well suited to continue to work with children. Any recommendations should be made to the church staff for their final approval. Any powers of church discipline shall be made with church leadership, meaning our pastors and pastoral leadership. However, information and recommendations from ministry leader will be given due consideration. So, long story short, that's the reporting policies. Now on to boundary violations. Now we know that quite often we are not going to find someone in the process of abusing a child. It's just with the other safeties in place, we're not going to see them. What we will see, and what we need to be aware of as a volunteer and as children's leadership, that we want to take boundary violations very seriously. We set up hurdles intentionally so that children can stay safe. The very first hurdle is to have our volunteer application, our background checks for our volunteers. We're also limiting access to the children throughout the children's ministry, but we are going to be asking volunteers to help keep track of one another. Because what we notice is it's when people try to push the boundaries is where we're going to see the grooming process, the getting ready for abuse process with perpetrators. So what we're going to want to be looking for, and boundary violations are things that when you see somebody who's not quite following the rules, it doesn't signal that there's abuse happening. However, it does require actions, responsible actions to ensure the safety. So if we see someone not following our child safety plan, we want to make sure that children are safe. We want to make sure that our volunteers are safe. So we're going to work together to help remind each other. So we want to remind each other not to be isolated in an area with a child and to continue to stay with the group. We're going to bring the child out of the isolated area and return the children to the ministry. But we also want to be keeping track, because it is quite possible that if someone is in the process of looking for opportunities, we will notice a pattern of breaking the boundaries. So we're asking you as volunteers to keep track of one another. We're wanting to make sure that we're using positive reinforcement with the children. So if we notice someone who's needing some time away from the group, allow that volunteer time to calm down their emotions, to be able to respond in a more godly way. So we're going to make sure that we're using our teamwork to be able to keep everybody safe. So if you notice someone who's having trouble, come alongside of them, see how we can change the dynamics in that. If you see someone who is hugging a child and the child seems uncomfortable, even in a visible area, we want to remind each other that physical affection should never be forced. So we're going to want to remind each other that it is the child that initiates a lot of the physical touch. So we want to make sure that if you see a child uncomfortable, that we're helping to bring that clarity, or bring that awareness to each other. Okay, so we're in the last section. Code of conduct. It's only taken us 28 minutes to get here, but we are going to reduce the risk in a couple different ways. We're going to reduce the risk to children when we increase our accountability to one another, to our leadership, to just make that accountability part of our ministry. We're also going to want to decrease the risk to children by decreasing the opportunities for isolation. Often when I need to work one-to-one with a child, I will take them out into the hallway to talk with them one-to-one, so they're not in front of the class. But in our particular church, we have cameras in the hallways. We have that opportunity to have that oversight, have someone, it's not isolated, it's open and observable, but we want to make sure that we're reducing isolation at all costs. Balance of power and control. A teacher is going to need some imbalance of power and control in order to keep the classroom moving in the right direction. But we are going to want to make sure that children have a voice. Make sure that children are not being manipulated, forced, that they are willing participants. So we're going to want to balance that power and control, because that is going to decrease the risk of other things. When it comes to accountability, we want to be accountable to one another for our actions. We want to make sure that we're creating an environment that is safe and encouraging to everyone, that is promoting our godly desire, like our desire to be more like Christ. So we are going to want to be an example of Christ likeness as much as we are humanly able to do. Visibility. We want to be open and observable. We want to be in highly visible areas. We want to remove that isolation. So what we want to avoid is one-to-one situations, whether that is an adult to a child, another child to another child. So we're going to want to keep things away from being a one-to-one within a closed environment, within a hidden environment especially. So we're going to try to have, our plan is to have 2 adults in each ministry area so that they can work together. We also want to remember that there is appropriate and inappropriate touch. So open and touch in an open setting rather than it being in a secretive type, like hugging a child in the hallway is different than hugging them in the classroom closet, okay? We want to care for children rather than meet the adult's needs. So touch, including hugs, should never be forced on a child. We do have some of our special needs children who will at times, their family will say this child needs they need a hug in order to reset. But that would be a very unusual or a very specific need. But most children, we want to allow them to initiate the touch. It should be age and developmentally appropriate. So a young baby, a toddler, a preschooler, they're going to need more appropriate touch than a teenager. So we're wanting to say it should be developmentally appropriate. And it should be at most times initiated by the child. When I'm serving in a nursery setting, it would be not unusual for me to have a child sit on my lap. If I am working with a teenager, I can't think of any need where that would be, unless it is your own family dynamic thing, which would not fall under these things. Touch should always communicate respect to children. Touch should immediately cease if the child is uncomfortable in any way. Okay. I feel like I'm saying things that we know are totally inappropriate, but I'm going to say them anyways because it's part of our policy. Adults, youth, or other children should not hit, slap, punch, push, hold against their will, or otherwise assault children. I think we can all agree to that. The exception is if there is a distressed child or an out-of-control child, moving them to a safe location is going to require 2 adults gently restraining and moving that child to a safer location. Signs of affection that are generally appropriate are verbal praise, side hugs, shoulder-to-shoulder hugs, high fives, fist bumps, pats on the shoulder, back, or head when they are culturally appropriate. For smaller children, touching their hands, their shoulders, their arms, giving hugs, holding them when others are present. We know that there are things, and I feel like it's not really even necessary to say, but we have it listed in our policy, so I want to say it anyways. Behaviors between adults and children that are inappropriate or may at least be perceived as inappropriate. So please refrain from touching buttocks, chest, genital areas, thighs, full body hugs, kissing, tickling, showing affection within an isolated location or when alone with the child. Of course, sleeping in bed with the child, inappropriate comments that relate to physique or body development, flirtatious or seductive looks, showing sexually suggested contacts or playing sexually suggestive games. any form of affection that is not wanted by the child. Okay. Any behavior that could be interpreted as sexual in nature. All of these are things not to do. And I feel like it's me saying what we all would agree to, but again, we're saying this for the sake of clarity. These are not appropriate. So we believe that parents are responsible for the training and the discipline of their own children. We know that parents are commanded to train up the child. And so we feel like we need to support families but not take over that role. First Baptist Church of Camdenton workers will never direct a parent on how a child should be disciplined. If parents wish to discipline their own child, we will encourage them to leave the children's ministry area before disciplining. Meaning, let's not encourage parents to discipline their children in that location. Let's have them move to a different space so that it is not something that could be interpreted as coming from the church itself. Discipline, we believe, should be corrective and not punitive, and only a parent or guardian can administer corporal punishment to his or her own child. However, discipline should never include harming or yelling, shaming, or in any other way to belittling a child. So we have a 3-step process here at First Baptist Church when it comes to getting behavior changes that from a disciplinary action. So when children are in our programs, whatever the program is, the child will be given an age-appropriate warning by their classroom leaders. This is something that would be a stop a second, I'm giving you this warning, we need to change, and this is what we need to change. Now, for a 3-year-old, that's going to look different from a 13-year-old, but you get my mind, an age-appropriate warning. Second time is escorted to the check-in team member who will supervise that reset time, that timeout time. Generally, we would say that's 1 minute for every year of life in an area of visibility. But we have found over the years that sometimes for check-in ministry, it is more about connecting with the child, helping them to reset their emotions and their actions, and then we're going to take them back to their classroom. After if that has already happened, they've had a warning, they've had a timeout, and they're on to the 3rd step. We're going to escort the child back to the check-in team, and then we are going to be able to just call mom and dad and say, let's try this again next time, and make sure that they're welcome to come back. But we're going to turn that over to the parent or guardian who can take it from there, because at this point we've frustrated the child, we've frustrated the workers. Let's just reset and try again. So when the designated adult is contacted regarding a disciplinary action, we want to make sure that we're approaching parents and guardians in a way that's helpful to them, in a way that's not going to embarrass them. So we're going to graciously share the facts of the incident, and then we're going to allow them to collect their child. We want to reassure them that we love their children and that we want to help them in any way possible, but we want to make sure that we're communicate that we're sending the child home is to redirect the inappropriate behavior. Please do not give disciplinary suggestions or advice unless it's specifically asked by the parent or guardian. We are not going to force an apology from the child. That is the parent's prerogative. If they decide to do that, that's totally their choice. We're not going to force an apology. We feel like that's an ingenuine action, so let's not even go there. If a child is sent home, we want to notify the children's ministry director as soon as possible, because we want to be able to track with that family, because we don't want them to just totally disappear after that one negative incident. So we're going to be following up with the family. For incidents that require or that involve severe harm or deliberate harm to themselves or to another, we're going to go ahead and bypass that whole 3-step process. We're just going to go straight to step 3, contact the adult, because we do not want to put our children in risk or danger, And so for those severe behavior incidents where it's going to harm another child or themselves, we're going to just go right ahead and try again the next time, because that is no longer a safe environment. So technology is our next part in our policies. And any employee or volunteer who's working with children is responsible to make sure that the technology used is appropriate. So we want to make sure that bullying, whether it's online or otherwise, will not be tolerated and should be reported to the parents and to the appropriate staff. Adults should refrain from building a relationship with a child or youth primarily over electronic medium, text, IM, etc., since this is not open and observable. There should be no sexual conversation between adults and children over any electronic medium, as that is abusive and strictly prohibited. All pornography and any other sexually explicit or suggestive content is strictly prohibited. We will not tolerate that, and if we have any concerns on that, we will be taking action. Leaders should be sensitive to their selection of music, movies, and games. We say that because every family has a different level of what they feel is appropriate for their family. So we want to be honoring to those that are finding it a little more conservative in their choices. So let's try our best to make sure that we're being sensitive to the movies, music, and games that are played in our programs. For photos, we ask that you check with your program leaders to see if there's any children in that program that have been requested not to be photographed. This generally involves our children that are placed in foster care or other families that have sensitive needs when it comes to having photographs put out. We do ask that you also make sure that name tags are not visible in any of the photos. The last thing we want is to have someone know a child's name, know their face, and know the location that they're at. That is actually not safe for families. So we ask that there'd be no photos of the name tags. Go ahead and blur the name tag out. Find a different way to edit the photo so that you can still enjoy it, but there is not a name associated with the child's face associated with our location. So bathroom use. This is something that will, again, vary depending on the ages of the children, but it's an increased risk to the children because of the need for privacy. We ask that whenever possible, workers wait in the hallway while children are using the restroom. When adult present is required to bring control, we tend to say prop the door open to the main bathroom area. This is for a multi-stall situation. Poke your head in, quickly encourage the kids to finish up what they're doing, and then step back out into the hallway. We're trying to, at all costs, to not be in a situation where we're in that privacy area for the children, but we're still able to continue to make those things good. So if a child needs assistance, do your best to involve another adult. Like, for instance, we've taken a group of children at Vacation Bible School to the bathroom and a child needs help. I'm going to take action by saying to the next leader, hey, I have to go help this child, just so that you know that where I'm at. So that's the kind of thing that we're hoping to do. We're also going to remind you that our student volunteers and our male volunteers, because of our culture the way it is right now, we're asking that you guys no longer don't help in the bathroom unless it is with your own children in your household. And so we're asking that's for diapers, for bathrooms, all that kind of stuff. Now, rules that are specific to the nursery. We want to make sure that, again, there's open and observable, good visibility, and adequate staff to supervise. We're going to ask that the women change diapers unless it is the father of the child. When changing diapers, we want to be respectful They should only be changed in designated areas where we can maintain those boundaries of open and observable while maintaining the privacy of the child. When assisting children in the bathroom, keep the door open so that you're not closed in the room with the child. Supervision. Regular supervision is part of accountability, and it reduces the risk. Every activity that happens at First Baptist Church in Camdenton is interruptible, and we're all accountable to one another. So program supervisors shall frequently and randomly stop to observe every classroom, every area where there are adults and children together. So if anyone comes along a group with within a locked door, remind them to unlock the door. We don't want that closed, don't want to see things. So that is why every room where we meet has a window in the door, is so that we're open and observable. Someone can walk in, check in on the group, make sure everybody's doing the same thing. Okay, we're getting close to the end, guys. It's been a long video. Leaving your ministry area. There are times when leaving the ministry area is necessary, or it's a planned part of the curriculum, such as visiting the sanctuary, taking a walk, or playing outside on a designated playground. Care should be given in planning these occasions to reduce the risk to children, as well as to bring confidence to the program leaders and the parents that the children are in a safe location. Events where children leave the designated area should be planned in advance with the program leader's approval. And parents should be informed, whether that is a note on the door saying, "We are out in the playground," or however that is. Regardless of the amount of children involved in the event, there should be a minimum of 2 adults present to ensure that no one adult is left with children in their care. Plenty of adults should be present to ensure the safety of the children when you are moving from a already safe environment within the program. And so program leaders should also be responsible to look at risk factors and to do some basic checks of the location each morning, making sure there's nothing that could harm the children. So interaction outside of program parameters. This is one where, as volunteers, we are given a privileged place within the lives of these children. And so we want to be clear with families when things are program planned and when they're personally orchestrated. So, for example, if you are wanting to have a group of children and you're wanting to take them to Dairy Queen, we need to make sure, if it is part of our program, that we have a field trip form on file with the Children's Ministry Office. If you as a person are wanting to take a kid out for an ice cream cone, and it's not related to our program, that is something that parents need to be aware of. I'm doing this on my own. Clearly inform the families that this is not an organized activity at First Baptist Church Camdenton. Be sure that you have enough supervision so that you're not left alone with a child or a group of children. Assess and address any dangers that children might face while they're in your care, whether that's traffic, pets, access to unsuitable adults, pools, equipment, tools, that kind of thing. So if you are doing this on your own as just a fun activity with kids and it's not part of our church, you've already had, you need to make parents aware that this is not part of our program, and you need to be responsible to make sure that the safety of the children is your priority. We want to encourage parents to participate or at least be present in the events, and we want to be clear with parents that your event will involve and not try to deviate from the plan. Arrange your transportation in advance, and as a courtesy to First Baptist Church, let the children's ministry director or program leader know that you are planning to host a private event. So, parent involvement. Parents are responsible for knowing where their children are at all times. We encourage parents to drop by unannounced. We are willing to allow them to observe any activity in which their child is participating. They have a key role in keeping their children safe. So we invite and we welcome involved parents, watchful parents who are going to make those unannounced visits to lead to a safer environment. Parents are encouraged to be educated on our policies and our code of conduct and help with their enforcement. So boundary violations. Let's have a look here. Again, to remind you that we're going to keep each other accountable, and we want to guard the boundaries that are placed within this. Now, at the very last page of our policies has how do you report and where do you report. So when anyone has a reason to suspect knowledge of abuse, child abuse in the scope of the children's ministry, it is required by Missouri law that he or she will report it to the civil authorities. We recommend that the child abuse and neglect hotline is 1-800-392-3738. Also, then follow through after you have made the report. Make sure that you file with us the report form, and make sure that that's sealed and given to the senior pastor. So guys, you have just finished that entire document with me. It's taken us almost an hour to go through it. I'm sorry, I know this is a long time, but you are good now. We have covered all the information. We are ready to go for this year, and we will be each year. You will need to read through and sign off that you have completed this training. So now that you've watched this, go ahead and sign off on all of our forms that you have done it for this school year. Thanks so much, volunteers. I know that this will be my last time to go through this with you all as I'm finishing up my time, and definitely would have preferred to be completely ready, but at least it's done now. And that's the thing that's important, is that we're following through with all of our requirements to keep children safe. Thank you so much for all you do here at First Baptist Church in Camdenton, and we value your participation in our programs. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.